Thank y'all for coming today to Splunk B-Sides. Today we're going to teach you dashboard dirty tricks of the Simplexml type.
That was my son Noah, and we are the father and son core team of Splunkster. Noah is my senior Splunk engineer. He's been with us since he was able to Splunk right after college, straight into Splunking for the last 6 years. I've been Splunking since 2006, since Splunk 3.0, and full-time, and have had my own company for 2/3 of that time. At Splunkster, we really focus on the tough cases. Where if you got something that you've tried and failed, you've had other people try and they failed, if your situation is a mess, we can take you from wherever you are to wherever you hoped you should be. We specialize in going from good enough to out of this world. That's what we do. We're all Splunk all the time. If you need help with your Splunk situation, give us a call.
You might have heard me say Simplexml and thought, isn't that going away? I've seen the Dashboard Examples app, the Dashboards Beta app, and I know what's coming. You know, everything's going to be click a button, get a dashboard. We're not going to be using Simplexml anymore.
Yeah, I've heard that before too, but not just this time. I've heard it at least 4 times. I heard that with Django. I've heard that with D3. I've heard that with the new, what's the new framework? I can't remember the name of it. There's the new one that's coming out. It doesn't matter. Simplexml was there in the beginning. It's here now and going stronger than ever, and it's never going to be removed. Even if they officially deprecate it, it's not going anywhere, and neither is the huge amount of dashboard expertise and dashboard XML code that's out there. So you are well served to keep using Simplexml and get some new tricks in your bag.
If you've used dashboards for any amount of time, you've used tokens. We use them on, I think, probably every dashboard I've built has had at least one token on it. And a common issue that I've run into is being confused setting up the tokens. You've got all of the different fields, and they're not very clearly labeled. You know, when you're setting those tokens, whether through the GUI or manually, you can't just say your field name in the data. So I've had to find ways to get insight into what tokens I'm setting. And the conventional approach is to use the Developer Gadgets app for Splunk. And if you're your own admin and you can just install whatever apps you'd like, it's totally fine to have a specific app just for developers. But many admins hesitate to install an app just for 1 or 2 people. So the much easier sell, and the sneaky way to get this, is to ask for the Dashboard Examples app. And not only will this be helpful for other people, but this will also come in handy for you. It's a great reference to be able to get some good, well-designed code for everything that the Splunk dashboards are capable of doing.
But you also get with that a free debugger, and not just any debugger, the exact same debugger from the Gadgets app. And that has a lot of other cool stuff, and there are a bunch of other apps that we demoed along with that one. You can check out our conference talk from a couple of years ago, 10 best Splunk apps and why you're crazy not to use them. But right now, I'm going to show you how to backdoor your way into the debugger in case you can't get the full app deployed. So I just clicked on Dashboard Examples. I'm here, and you'll notice that Simplexml Examples is the name of the app and the app context where we're operating, where our code runs. And that's important because your dashboard code has to run in this app. So once you're here, you go to Settings, User Interface, which takes you here, and Add New. You're adding a new view. And in this view, you're going to copy your existing current dashboard code, and you're going to give it a name that's easy to find and lets people know that it's okay to debug it if they don't know what it is. Erase me debug. And what you notice at the top is that yours probably looks like this or maybe even thinner like this, or maybe even it looks like this. It doesn't really matter if it's a dashboard or a form. I'm not going to get into the differences there, but what's important, because it all works the same, is you put after that first word script equals event token browser JS in your, it's got to be in this app context, remember. You click save, and now when I load this dashboard, I'm going to get the same dashboard I'm used to seeing at the top, but in the middle there's going to be two extra pieces. In the middle is a token debugger, and at the bottom is going to be your source code. So in one long view, you can see everything. So here is the token debugger, and here's my source code. And what you notice is that I can set any of these execution stages to show the debugging. And probably most of what you'll use is done and preview. So if I click on these, and what you'll see is as code is happening in done, it sets a bunch of tokens, and here are all these tokens. And I have actually discovered several undocumented tokens. There are several for Trellis that may not even be in the documentation yet, and you wouldn't know they exist unless you went into the debugger and started clicking around and see, and we discovered tokens that we really needed. It saved our bacon, the Trellis tokens, and the only reason we found it is because we loaded up the debugger and we saw them. So make sure you delete your dashboard when you're done so you don't pollute the Dashboard Examples app.
Another really helpful thing in Splunk is search macros. Any amount of reducing duplicate work in anything, coding especially, the more code you can reuse, the better. So I'm sure you're already using search macros, but a really handy thing is Shift-Control-E. So when you are using a macro in a search, or you open a dashboard panel in a search, there's that macro name, and it's kind of a black box. You know, you're trying to think, what filters did I put in there? You know, do I have all the filters I need? Do I have all the code I need? And when you hit Shift-Control-E, it will expand that macro in the window and merge it with the rest of the code into one search, which is great because now you can see all of the code together. But it's also bad because now you can see all of the code together.
You don't know where it came from.
And you don't know where the macro stops. So an easy thing to do is to annotate that macro with this trace comment like this. So you can sandwich it, you know, it's the bun of your macro, and you can say rename trace as beginning of macro, and then your macro name, and then all of your macro guts, and then end of macro. And this is going to be inside your macro. It's not going to be on the outside in your search. This will be in the guts of your macro. So you'll only see this when you use Shift-Control-E. But this is a great way to not get confused as to which code is where.
Yeah, that code also, Shift-Control-E might not be the exact thing. Different languages use different keyboards and different encodings, and it's different on a Mac. So you might have to look up in the documentation what the exact keystroke is. But the point is, it's there, and you should use it.
And you can also, that works for nested macros. So if you have multiple macros stacked together.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's especially helpful because the problem just becomes more and more compounded the more macros are inside of each other.
Yep. He's talking about not the Shift-Control-E, but the bun. That bun is super important. All right, so this project we've been working on recently has a great deal of mapping, and I'm sure you've all been touched mapping a little bit. It's really cool. It's a great visualization, but what we found is that the documentation is lacking. It isn't that the documentation is wrong. It just doesn't tell you everything you need to know. There's some basic getting started stuff, that some other places like these blogs show that's just not there. And it took us forever to really come up to speed on maps. We thought it would be really easy. It took us weeks to really figure out what we were doing and get it, even the very basic things working. And what we found was that these links are really most of what you need. But before you jump in and start doing that, the too long don't read is don't use core maps. You can make it work. You can use some of these tricks that we're going to show you to really stretch its capabilities. But what we found is we almost immediately outgrew maps and had to move to Maps Plus. And what was surprising is there's basically nothing that carries over. Maps Plus is a complete redo. It's a full re-architecture from the ground up. There's almost nothing that you can save if you start with Maps and you decide to move to Maps Plus. So don't even bother. Just start with Maps Plus. It's written by a Splunker. It's supported by a Splunker. It's part of his job. It's he's very responsive. We've gotten bug fixes handled right away. We've gotten interesting feature requests handled right away. I mean, I can't guarantee that you'll get that kind of response, but, you know, be nice to the guy. It's a great product. If you have a good idea, he'll probably like it, and if he likes it, he'll put it in. That was our experience.
Maps of sites in the US for a client, and we did all of the code, we had the visualizations showing up, and they said, we can't zoom in far enough, you know, we're not getting good detail. We're looking at Texas, but we have multiple locations in Texas. We need to be able to see all of them. And we dinked around in the settings, and we said, all right, no problem. You can zoom in as far as you like now. And they came back to us and said, yeah, we can zoom in more, but it's blank. And that was much harder than removing the zoom limitations. So you can see here that it says that the default is 7 on the max zoom value. And that's for a very good reason, because by default, when you zoom in past 7, the maps are blank. So your visualizations, your pie charts or whatever will be there, but there won't be anything around them. They'll just be swimming in the ocean of light or dark mode.
So the solution is really easy. Here's the way it looks in the beginning, and I'll show you what zooming in looks like. If I zoom in, well, I can't get zoomed all the way in, so I'm prevented. See, I can't zoom in any farther. I'd like to see Fort Worth, but I can't. So, okay, no problem. I'll remove the limitation. I'll edit this, and I'll go into the Tiles tab, and okay, max zoom 7. I'll set it to 20, bumped up. Great. So now we come back out here, and now I'm zooming in, and what happened? But you see the problem. All I've got is nothingness. Where am I? Where's Waldo? This is that sea of nothingness that Noah was talking about. And the reason that zoom of 7 is there is to make sure that this doesn't happen, so that there's always detail. And if you need more detail at a larger zoom, you have to set a tile set. And I don't know why they didn't put this in by default. It's got to be some copyright problem, but they say right here, here's an open source tile set. Just grab it right from here, paste it in, and use it. And once you save it, boom, now you've got everything. Look, there's Fort Worth, there are all the streets. But if you don't know that trick, and it's not documented, nobody calls it out, it's not rocket science, you're going to flounder around for a long time wondering why your maps don't look like everybody else's maps in all the demos and all the videos you see. But it's really easy to straighten out.
Our pain, your gain.
Exactly.
One thing that is great about Splunk is there are many ways to achieve the same thing. But there are also best practices, and just because something works doesn't mean it's the best thing to do.
Or that it will scale.
Right. we ran into this with logic multiplexing and handling multiple token sets in one search. So in this situation, in this code here, we need to set 2 tokens, each with 2 possible values based on the search results. You'll see in this first condition that it's looking for where count 1 is greater than 0 and count 2 is greater than 0. When that condition is met, when that condition is matched, you can see that it is setting both show tab 1 and show tab 2. Now, if both of those are not greater than 0, not equal to 0, it moves on to the next condition match, which is count 1 not equal to 0. And if count 1 is not equal to 0, it will set that show tab 1. And the third condition match is count 2 not equal to 0, show tab 2. And if neither of those are true, it will not show either of them. Both of those tokens will be unset. And this example is simple, so this would work fine, but you run into major issues if you're setting multiple token sets like you are quite often.
Exactly. It just doesn't scale. So here's the same set of conditions, but it uses a trick that we discovered by conjecture. We had some 2 or 3 variables and 2 or 3 settings, and it was starting to get out of hand already. And we knew we were going to have some that would have 5 or 6, and so with the multiplexing logic, the number of settings you have and the number of values of each setting get multiplied. So if you have 2 and 2, you have 4 case statement, 4 different case statements, and in each case statement you have 2 tests. But if you have 10 and 10, that means you have 100 different case statements, and that's just impossible. So we just said, it sure would be nice if we could handle each variable on its own, each token on its own. So if you had 10 and 10, that means you'd have 10 sections with 10 case statements in each section. But you wouldn't have to multiplex them together. They would be completely separate. And you could just cut and paste and change 1 to 2 throughout the section, and 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. It's super easy to maintain. You could even set up some macros and stuff like that. Work great. So, but in order to do that, you would need multiple sections. And it turns out that you can run multiple sections. You can have multiple done sections, multiple change sections. We've had 5 or 6. I don't know if they run sequentially or simultaneously, but it doesn't matter, because what you're doing here is separating out what should be separate conditions in logic anyway. This just works, and it's not documented anywhere, and probably this is the only place you're ever going to hear about it, but this will make your dashboards much easier to read and much easier to maintain.
Splunk is very set on sorting lexicographically. Sometimes if you think you've gotten away from it, you haven't. It'll always come back and resort for you. So in this situation, you need to sort fields by severity and then lexicographically. So within that severity, it will be sorted lexicographically. We were having trouble finding a way to do this, and we realized that we could pad and cheat the system by adding white spaces leading up to our field values. So as you can see in the comments, it says rename comment 1 of 2, sort putting worst access first and leftmost. This assumes highest severity equals worst. So let's say there's a scale of 3, red, yellow, green, and it says highest severity equals worst. So that's going to be 3, yellow is going to be 2, green is going to be 1. Our eval line 3 there, is going to add 3 spaces in front of the reds And then within those, all of them that have the 3 spaces, those will be sorted lexicographically. And then 2 spaces for yellow and 1 space for green. And this was the easiest way for us to get around that limitation and have them sorted by severity, which is very important because you want to see, especially when things are paginated, you want to see all of those critical things first.
If you take a look at that link, we're not going to go there, but there's a thread where this topic was beaten to death, and there are several different answers, including the answer we just showed you. It's got a much broader context than just this particular thing, so you should check it out. There's a bunch of good SPL there that's portable for a bunch of different use cases. So in our dashboard, you can see right now, Marriott is offline. He's sorted first in front of all the green. So everything in Fort Worth is green, but I'm going to change that. I'm going to make the first asset, what would normally be sorted first, I'm going to put him in the middle by changing his state to yellow. And I'm going to take the one that would normally be last, and I'm going to make him red, which should make him float to the top. Now keep in mind that these changes in the code, they don't set the state, they don't set the color, that sets the state of the asset. It says my temperature is too high, and then that is interpreted as a severity. And now you can see what's happened down here. Asset 25 would normally be alphabetically last, but he is floated first to the top. And asset 1, which would normally be first, he's second, and all of Marriott is offline, and it's because offline is less severe than these. And then everything else is okay. So if you look at the labels, you can see that the spaces at the beginning are not actually there. The XML renderer removes the spaces, so even though they're behind the scenes having a sorting effect, as far as we can see, they're not having any centering or display effect of any kind, which is exactly what we were shooting for.
A super fun thing that one of our coworkers happened across is that Splunk out of the box supports emojis. We used this in the case of an overview dashboard just to get a really simple view of how things were doing. So no numbers had to be read or anything. You could just at a glance see the little emojis and what they were doing. So your OS supports emojis and your browser supports emojis, and Splunk uses that XML and HTML code, so out of the box you're able to just use these emojis. And you can see in this code here at the bottom where it is using the eval, and it's just that emoji straight pasted in. So you can go to this unicode.org, and there's a list of emojis, all the emojis from Facebook, Samsung, Google, Apple, all of them. And you can just copy that icon and paste it into that eval statement, and it will just show up with that icon. So it won't have, you can do a table and just have that emoji, and you can get a quick at-a-glance view at what's happening.
And if you want to see more, you can check out the emoji app. It shows you how to scale emojis and do a bunch of other things with them. I'm going to show you a really basic, simple search. I copied this right out of the slideshow. I pasted it in here, and you can see that it runs. And one of the artifacts of cutting and pasting in Windows is you sometimes get these new line things that come through. So they don't hurt anything. You can see my code runs, right? It runs and it does it. But notice what happens when I delete this. I delete that and it works. It deleted it. But these emoji glyphs, they're 2-character Unicode things, and they appear to be 1 character, but in actuality they're 2 characters. So if I go to try and delete this character by backspacing over it, it doesn't work because I'm actually in the wrong position. I need to move 1 character to the left. Oh, even then I missed it. 2 characters to the left, and then I can delete it, which is even worse the farther you go. So that's really weird. So over here, I'd have to be like way like on top of the X to delete it, right? It's weird. So you're going to have some trouble editing if you use these. So it's best to put them in at the end. And furthermore, it's best to use one glyph per line. That way, you can see I just had the same problem. You're only going to be off by one set, and it's a lot easier to edit if you do it that way. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really confusing to try and keep up with it. But this is a really fun way to play around with quick and dirty graphical presentation. Don't need to install any apps. You just go to that Unicode page, cut it, paste it in. It just works.
And that Splunk-based app doesn't just have emojis in it. It has some different examples of code as to how to integrate it into the different visualizations, like the trend visualization and several others. I'm colorblind, so this we actually had to figure out because of me, because I butchered a couple of our dashboards. What we had was several different dashboards with hex codes, and someone said, hey Noah, we need you to make this red, that yellow, and whatever, critical red, warn yellow, info green. And Splunk doesn't format the colors nicely like that. That'd be great if when you posted a hex code, pasted it in.
Be great for me.
But
you're colorblind.
Actually, that's true. It still wouldn't help me. It would help other people. It would help the gibberish part of it. So you'll run into this where you don't know what that is. And critical's kind of self-explanatory that would be red. But oftentimes, you're just doing general formatting. And you're going to have to go and paste that into a, Google or whatever and see what color that is. And the way that we got around this was using tokens. So you can see that we have token color green, and then you go in and you find the color green that you'd like to use, and you put that inside of the set token. And then elsewhere, you reference it like you would a normal token. So you do $color green $. This is the part that was helpful for me, because I was able to they said, all right, green is good, green means go, so I could just say, all right, color green. And this not only avoids confusion, but it also makes sure that you're using the same hex code everywhere. You can easily scroll through and say, okay, yep, we're using this color green, and if you need to change it, you only have to change it in one place, and it updates the whole board, which, similar to the search macros, the less code rewriting you have to do in the fewest places, the better.
And in this case, if they were to say, hey, make info blue, no, it doesn't even have to know what blue looks like. He just changes that word green to blue, and now info's blue.
Yep.
But it gets even better. So in our case, we had a situation where, and you'll notice, we're using the same code fragment here, which is mapping field colors. So mapping field colors here was hard-coded. I went back 2 slides. Mapping field colors here is dereferenced at one level. But now we're going to dereference it one more time. It's the same mapping, but instead of saying a color, green, we're going to say Fort Worth color. Because the Fort Worth assets are going to be the Fort Worth color, the Marietta assets are going to be the Marietta color. And we're going to set Fort Worth's color based on the results of some search. So if, in this case, the result.color for Fort Worth is green, we're going to set Fort Worth color to green. If it's blue, you're going to set it to blue, and so on. And if you accidentally make a mistake, we're going to set it to the debug color. So if we ever see this funky color show up, we're like, oh, there's a bug in our dashboard. That color is never used anywhere else. So this is super, super flexible, but it gets even better than that. With all of these first 3 solutions, I backed up a slide, you have the same situation where your single dashboard now is coherent, consistent, and easy to maintain, because red is this, you color red, no matter where you use it, it references that init section. But what if you have 50 dashboards and you'd like to have all of them use the same red? and they say, you know what, that red is too bright and you need to tone it down. Now I have to edit 50 dashboards, which is a pain. But what you can do is you can use macros. Now this takes a little bit of doing because macros are only leveraged inside of SPL. And dashboards don't really use SPL. They use XML. So you have to have some transition from SPL to XML. And so in this case, we use a hidden base search, which doesn't have any other post-process search attached to it. Its only purpose is to read in any macro inside of this app, which starts with XML color, and set a token based on that color name to the value that's in the macro. And you can even dereference it one more layer, because you'll notice that this color debug is referencing another color macro, which is 0000. So this debug, its color can be changed across all dashboards as well by setting it to some other color or to its own independent hex code. So the key here is that you have to have this base search, and now all of your dashboards across your entire app use the same hex. And be aware that Splunk, in most cases, you can use the pound prefix or the 0x, but we did find one case, the horseshoe modviz does not like 0x. So we suggest that you always use the pound prefix when specifying hex codes, because you might find that you need that dashboard, that horseshoe viz, and it won't work if you use the 0x.
Lookups and summary indexes are a great tool to reduce queuing, increase search speed, but an issue is that both of those things have to be created ahead of time. That's the point, is that you're not running it ad hoc. You load that data once and you're able to access it very quickly because that data is already curated. And this comes into play if you're using a dashboard that has a time picker, and some of the options are time periods that are not in your main lookup. So say that you have a daily, like a 365 lookup, or a summary index, and you have a search that's running each night and updating that lookup or creating that summary index, and someone selects last 30 minutes on the time picker. Well, if you're just using that lookup, it's not going to return any results, or it's going to return an error because there is no data from then because your search ran overnight. But with this sneaky solution, you're actually able to automatically load the search logic from that lookup creator search, take that code after loading that job in, and run that ad hoc search off of that exact logic. And similar, like we've been saying, a lot of these hints have been saving you time and from pain of having fragmented code. So you can see on the line that says set token equals history search, you just reference whatever search you're using to create that summary index or update your lookup, and it will bring that logic in, but apply the time picker from your board to that logic and then display that on your dashboard.
One thing to beware is if your scheduled search is using all time, then this won't work because the scheduled search has to be using something other than all time, so that your pipe save search would use your time picker from your dashboard. So ours is running for last 30 days, which is not all time, which is why it works. So the time picker right now is last 30 days. And we're going to go down here and we're going to open this up, and last 30 days is in the window of our lookup because our lookup operates for the last 30 days. So when we go look at what search populated that table, we see that all it did was an input lookup last 365 days, because that 30 days is within that, And that's all it did, and it was very fast. So I'm going to go back here and change this to today. And that's going to load the very same, everything on the dashboard is going to reload, including this table at the end. But today is not covered in last 365 days because today is today. So when I open this, what you're going to see is it calls the save search called daily populating last 365 lookup. It calls this search and pulls in its code. So it does everything that this does, but we have the only code, the only SPL, the only place that exists is inside this search. So I don't clone the code and put it in my dashboard. Now I only have to maintain that code one place, no matter what time picker value I use. So this time picker example is an either or, but if you did this for all time, you could create this to do the oldest time as pipe save search, and then the middle year is last 365 days, and then the section at the end for now and today uses pipe save search, and we actually did that as well, and it worked very well. But we kept it simple for this use case so you could see the core difference is that you do different pieces. Now there is an additional nuance here. Inside this search, where it says you must list all tokens used in history search in the depends section. This is because once I set the token, this history search token, it's only going to get set one time. So if there's a token in here and you change the token, if you don't cause this search to rerun, then this SPL will be stale and it won't be correct. So you can either use your token inside this search, or you can set it as it depends.
For this dirty trick, we have a dashboard with the default of all. For this example, we have a site selector, and the default is all, and then we have two other options, Fort Worth and Marietta. And the issue or the situation that brought this to light was we had people complaining that our pickers weren't working, and we realized what was happening was they were selecting Fort Worth, but the all wasn't being dropped from the multi-select, so it runs without an error because Fort Worth is part of all. You know, that works, but they wanted to only be searching for Fort Worth. So you can see in this change stanza, it says mv count form.site equals 2. So it's counting how many things are selected in the form. And then it's indexing, and it's looking for if that all asterisk is the first thing. And if there are more than one, it's looking for 2, and the first one of those is all, it's going to drop the all, drop that first one, and only load the secondary option that you picked, because the all is there, and after you select something, it shows up underneath that on the multi-select. And the MV find, that next row down, is looking for if the all is in there, the asterisk, the wildcard, is there at all. And in this case, if all is at the bottom, it's going to drop everything else above it, because it says all includes everything. So if I'm at the bottom of it, whatever's selected above it needs to be cleared and will drop down to all. And this will do this dynamically as long as you have search when changed set to true. If you don't have it set to true, it causes all kinds of odd fragmentation and errors. So when you do this, make sure that you have search when changed set to true for that input.
And also, this is hard-coded for the case where your all selection is first. If you have a different default, you can use a similar strategy, but you're going to have to completely rewrite this code for your use case. But the vast majority of multi-selects have an all case in them, and they look just like this. So we've only ever used this code because all of ours do the same thing.
So we start with all. So that's the default. So if I delete it, it just puts it back. All is always going to be there by default. But if I add Fort Worth, notice what it did. It removed the all. It was there for a second, but it removed it. By default, it would just leave all and Fort Worth. It would rerun my search, which is a shame because it's not going to do anything because no data is going to change. Similarly, if I have other things in here and I add all, it's going to say, oh, all is all. Let me add just all and remove the other stuff. Now, this might seem stupid, but picture how bad it is with 50 settings. If you have to train your users how to use your dashboard, or even worse, how to use a Splunk feature that doesn't work that great in your dashboard, they're going to lose confidence in you, they're going to lose confidence in Splunk, they're going to be frustrated with your dashboard. This is a great way to make it work the way that it should work anyways.
Well, and this reduces queuing too. It's processing that before the searches are run. So even if the users did realize, oh, I know why it didn't work, they had to reload 8 panels again. And if you're in tight performance constraints, the boards might queue after that because you're loading 16 searches, back to back. So this also is just a lighter workload on the system as well. So it increases efficiency in that way as well.
And that's all we have. We hope you guys enjoy Splunk B-Sides, and we hope to see you back at conference. We're going. It's hybrid this year. It's going to be in person. I'm going to be there. Noah's going to be there. We hope you all will be there and come by and say hi to us.
Thank y'all.